Minimum wage. Why do people think that jumping $5, $10 at one time is actually a good thing? It's never been a good thing. Every time it's done, a lot of people lose their jobs, businesses close, people are moved to part time, and then it's a struggle for, and of course it causes inflation. Um, it's ridiculous. Your minimum wage is an incentive for you to better yourself, not to sit there and cry and ask for handouts, right? Almost everyone has worked, a part-time job at one point. Most people, maybe your first job, or maybe it was just a summer job through high school or college, but you worked minimum wage. How did you like it? You don't like that paycheck. So now that's your incentive to say, well, I don't want to stay at minimum or just a little bit above minimum. I want a hell of a lot more. All right, what do I got to do to change that? And then you figure out what's best for you and you move forward, leaving minimum wage behind. But if you have government every year or two bumping you up $1, $5, $2, you know, then lazy people, it's easy to get lazy. There's no incentive to really move. Well, there's still incentive because ultimately it doesn't matter what they move it from. In California, they've moved it to 20, but they could move it to 50 overnight. Nothing will change for your lifestyle because very quickly, inflation catches up and everything else is, um, on par with what you're making. So you're in the same spot or worse. Typically, it's worse because, like this $20 an hour, on day one, some businesses closed. Um, so now everyone's out of work. And then some businesses cut some bunch of people part time because it's too big of a jump, an extra 25%. Plus now uh, you're in a higher tax bracket, so the company has to match your taxes. So they're paying not just the $4 extra an hour, but more in taxes. And again, it's not just the um, minimum wage workers, because the supervisors, if they were already at 20, you have to give them a comparable raise, $4 or $5. You have to, because if I'm your supervisor, I'm at 20, you're at 16, and then suddenly today you're at 20. Uh, Unacceptable. I've been here a long time. I'm your boss. How can you make the same money? You have to pay me more now. And then it keeps going uphill. And then their boss and their boss and their boss, everyone above them has to get paid another 25% or it's close to it. Otherwise, you're going to lose, experienced managers. So it's not just the minimum wage workers; it's everybody. So a small business, they may not be able to handle that. Most small businesses operate at a relatively small profit, around 10% roughly. And so they're not making a ton of money for a small business. Maybe you make 80 to 100,000 a year, and you might say, "Oh, that's good money." Well, now you have to pay all these employees that extra money. Now you're down to 50 or 60. That's not even worth having in your business. All the headache, the struggle, the saving money to open the business, all the planning, busting your hump for years to get to a good point, and then there comes government, chop your knees out, and now you're back down to where you were years ago. And it makes people just say, "Screw it! I'm just going to close it up. I'll just go to work for somebody else because this is ridiculous. I can go to work for somebody else and make 50 or 60 grand or more. Why have the headache and the hours? You know." Um, but ultimately, for minimum wage workers, your lifestyle is the same. Doesn't matter where you're at. When I started working way back in the Stone Age, minimum wage was $4.25 an hour. $4.25. What could you get for $4.25? Not much. You had enough to maybe share an apartment with a couple of people, um, live at home with family, and maybe pay them, $100 a month for rent, 200 maybe. Um, Maybe get rent a room from somebody. That's what I did before for years. Just rent a room from someone for 3, 4, 500, depends on the neighborhood, um, and then just enough for cheap food, transportation, and the occasional clothes, and maybe if you work it right, you might be able to go out to eat once a month or the movies, something. So you're not good. You're just basically you're barely getting by. So now at 20, it's the same thing. 425 40 years ago, 20 now, it's no different. 20 now gets you the same thing it got you. Actually, maybe worse because, excuse me, maybe worse because now everyone has the cell phones and all the different electronics, so you're spending money on that type of stuff. Whereas 40 years ago, you didn't have any of that, so it was much simpler. Um, and I mean, we saw I think the first one was many years back in New Jersey. For some reason, they just did it with the car washes, moved people to $15 an hour, and a third of them closed overnight. So a third of the workers gone, fired, goodbye. And the ones that did stay, again, their lifestyle didn't change, or not much. Well, then for them, I think then it was they probably were okay. They were a little bit better because it was just the car washes, so that wouldn't cause any major inflation. Um, but there's always negative associated with it. People will always lose their job when you move it up too fast. So a dollar is reasonable. You want to move it up a dollar every other year. I think that's reasonable. Um, I mean, California finally, for the first time, did it smart before. About 8, 9 years ago, they raised it from 10 to 15, but not all in one shot. They took 6 years to go from 10 to 15. So it was more incremental, so you didn't have this shock or just overnight, I have to pay all this extra and I don't have the income coming, you know? Um, so that was okay. Then, of course, immediately after it got to 15, they moved to 16. And now they want to just jump it to 20? It's stupid. Here's why they're doing it. Most people don't understand it. Because there's no benefit. There's really no benefit to anybody. Everybody loses. The workers that are going to 20, like I said, their lifestyle's not going to be any better. And then, a lot of them cut to part-time, so they're worse. And then some lost their jobs. So why do it, right? You're not going to gain votes, right? So scratch your head. Why do it? I'll tell you why. Because the state is suffering. They don't have enough to pay their bills. And they're in a position now because they've been running things horribly for so long. So basically it's a house of cards economy where if things can get a little bit worse, the whole economy can just crash. Because they've been living on credit and on raising taxes, and that's how they've been able to sustain themselves. Well, now people are leaving. Corporations, big corporations, are leaving. People are leaving by the hundreds of thousands. And homelessness is through the roof. Well, you're not getting any revenue from the homeless, right? No, they're costing you money. Then you have so many people living at or below the poverty line. You're not getting revenue from them. They're costing you money. Wealthy people are leaving. So you have a huge debt now. I mean, I think they're at 600 billion in debt, and then where just a couple of years ago they were getting more revenue than they needed, so they had a little extra. Of course, they squandered that, and now that's dropped down to where they don't have enough that they're bringing in. So they've already pretty much maxed out what they can do on taxes. They can't tax people anymore, and the corporations they can't. They're already chasing them out. They can't add more taxes and regulations. They've already put a toll on every damn bridge and pretty much every road they could, so they can't get any more revenue that way. They've raised, permit fees and fines and registration fees and parking fines and traffic fines so much they can't really do much there. There's not much room there, and they refuse to actually lay off people so that the budget can be met. So then, what do? How do you generate more income, more revenue for the state? Well, with $20 an hour minimum wage. So that's an extra little bump in revenue. At least that's their thinking. But you see, it's already backfiring on them, and if they get anything, it won't be much, and it won't last for very long. So now you're gonna see them maybe later this year or next year. They're gonna try something else, something else silly. They're already trying to go after wealthy people that are leaving the state and saying, well, you can't just leave. You gotta, they're gonna try and find some way to try and chase you down around the country and make you pay, I don't even know what they're gonna call it, exit tax? I don't know. It's certainly not lawful, but they're gonna do it anyway. I mean, I used to live there, and I'm gone. I've been gone for 4 years, so more than 4 years. I was a truck driver, so I was basically gone. Been gone for 10 years, but but anyway. So yeah, that's all they do is just like when they're in a pinch, then they find some way to, like in 2008, when you had that crash and the revenue came down dramatically, they were in a panic. All cities, the counties, the state were in a panic. So then that's when you see they came up with the cell phone law, right? Okay, let's generate revenue on that. And it started at $35 fine. Within a year, it had gone to $165, and then it's gone up since then. I think it's at $250 now or something. And then they turned the police into revenue generators instead of law enforcement. So instead of the police patrolling the neighborhood, they would sit on the side of the road and just watch people. And their favorite thing was trying to get people on cell phones, seatbelts, because those were just a quick hit and easy revenue generators. And then you saw police officers going on the highway, because the highway ran through the city, or skirted right on the edge of it. So they'd go on the highway and start giving tickets on the highway. And it's like, wait a minute, your people from your city are paying you to protect their city, not the highway. But they didn't care because they needed to get as much revenue as possible. So if you look at at when they do things like this, like seatbelt laws, helmet laws, cell phone laws, jumping minimum wage in one huge chunk, things like this, look at how the state is doing, or that city, on how they're doing in terms of revenue generation. And you will always find that they're low and they need that bump. So they come up with some other law in order to get money from the slaves. I mean, from the people. That's the way they look at us, like slaves. We're just dollar signs to them, and they don't really give a rat's ass about us, as long as we're, paying taxes, being good slaves. So, anyhow, I went on too long with this. So, minimum wage hikes, you shouldn't do more than $1 at a time, maybe every other year. Depends on how inflation is going to. If the inflation is stagnant, you don't need to bump it up. By you bumping it up, it's going to cause inflation. So, all right.